नमः सुन्दरनाथाय तस्मै हालास्य वासिने चतुष्षष्टि विधा लीला येनाकारि भुवस्थले श्रीमत्सुन्दरनाथस्य देवीं शफरलोचनां कलये हृदये नित्यं कदम्बवनवासिनीं पूतं स्वतः पूततरं ततो यत् गाङ्गं पयः शङ्करमौळिसङ्गात् तत्पातु मातः प्रणयापराधपादाहतैः पूततमं ततो नः. Last class we stopped with the 23rd shloka. Arthavabodhepi same rasajnaihi anvishyate satkavi suktireva apatyalabhepi same vidagdhaha rupottaramevahi rochayante. So the process of satkavi sukti, how it is better than, see, many people write it is better than other poetry. So many people write kavyam, likhitani santi punaha likhyante cha, but how do we find the difference between the two? You know, do people accept all type of poetry, or is it only some type of poetry that is accepted by people? For that, the poet answers here saying that Satkavi Suktihi eva rasajnaihi anvishyate. Rasajnaihi, rasajnyaha yaha rasam janati, saha rasajnyaha athava kavyatma vit kavyasya atma kutra vartate iti yaha janati, saha. It's like a connoisseur or a rasika. Rasikas always look for Satkavi Suktihi. Uttama kavinam vak eva anvishyate. They only look for a good poet's works, because what you get out of a good poet is the artha, the better rasam is what you get from a good poet. Every poet tries to convey something or the other. Artha avabodhe same api. Even though the process of illuminating a meaning, process of giving out a meaning is common, is equal with all poets, the sayings of a good poets are searched by rasikas, because they know that from the saying of a good poet you get a good meaning or some moral of a story, something you attain meaning that is valuable to your life. The same way, he gives an drishtanta here, he gives an upama here, actually, saying that even though getting a child from anybody is common, but you look for a more beautiful wife, beautiful person from whom you can get a child. I would, someone pointed out that it can be better taken as, Rupottara can be taken as the wife. So only if a person is beautiful to look at, or beauty is also there in the eyes of the beholder. So when you find yourself attracted towards that person, then automatically the gunas are also reflected in that person, and you understand that the apatyam, the child, the offspring that you attain from that person would also be superior in qualities, right? So arthavabodhepi same rasajnaihi anvishyate satkavi suktihi eva apatyalabhe api same vidagdhaha rupottaramevahi rochayante vyomasanskrit. Now, how does this kavita give pleasure to a reader, right? So when you search for a sat kavita, now what happens next? Why do you search for a sat kavita? Artha avabodhaha jayate. Parantu kevalam artha avabodhaha na tadanantaram anandopi jayate iti vaktum atra. So vyomasanskrit vividhaihi vachobhihi vyavartayanti anya kalasu drishtim kalam mahantam kshanavath nayanti kanta iva daksha kavita dhinoti. Kavita kanta iva daksha kanta iva dhinoti. Dhinoti, the verb here is dhind, dhivi prinane. Prinane, to please. So daksha kanya iva, daksha kanta iva, na kevalam kanya. Kanta is more used in the sense of an attraction or a beloved. like a person who will who is very attractive to you, and she is also an expert, daksha kanta iva, who is an expert in making you making a person happy. Okay, so kavita, the poetry, is like a daksha kanta iva, like an expert woman. The poetry pleases people. Whoever who reads a poetry, the poetry pleases like an expert beloved. So how does it do? Katham anandayati patitrana iti padatrayena uchyate. So vyamohayanti vividhaihi vachobihi. That's the first reason. That's for comparison between a poetry and an expert beloved. So the first thing she does is, a woman, she confuses the mind with different kinds of speech. So vividhaihi vachobihi vyamohayanti. Vyamohayanti, she makes the, not exactly confuses, or she tries to bring the person to her way of thinking. The poetry also is like that. In Kavya Prakasha, Mamata says that Kanta Sammitataya Upadesha Yuje. In one of the few introductory classes also, I said there are 3 types of literature. Excuse me. There are 3 types of literature. One is, if you take Veda, the Vedas are Prabhu Samhitam. We say that it orders, gives orders like a Prabhu, like an overlord. Etat kartavyam, etat na kartavyam. Idi kevalam tatra adeshaha diyate vedaihi. Tadanantaram yadi puranam pashyamaha tatra mitra sammitam, suhrit sammitam. Just as how a friend would advise, see, look at the life of this person, look at the life of this person. When he acted good, he reaped such good benefits. And when he acted in a very bad manner, he had to face certain difficulties in life. So, Ravanavat, Ramadivat, Vartitavyam, Ravanadivat, na iti suhrit yatha upadishati tatha. Puranam upadishati. So that is one type. The third type is your Kanta Sammitataya Upadesha Yuje. Kanta, just as how a woman, a beloved, gives an Upadesha in a very beautiful manner, like a sugar-coated pill. She gives advice in the same manner. Kavita, or classical poetry, adopts the form of saying things in a more beautiful manner. So you're confused by a lot of beautiful things, but suddenly there will be one nice niti embedded within that beauty. So vividhaihi vachobihi, using bahuprakaraihi vagvilasaihi, vyamohayanti, bhramayanti. It confuses the mind with different kinds of speech. So vyamohayanti atra shatra pratyayam, it's strilinga. Okay, prathama vibhakti. The next reason for comparison between Kavita and an expert beloved is Anya Kalasu Drishtim Vyavartayanti. Anya Kala Vishayeshu. Once you start reading poetry, once you find the attraction that words have, you will stop looking for joy from any other type of kala. It slowly brings you into this, right? So Anya Kalasu Drishtim Vyavartayanti. Vyavartayanti is Paravartayanti, athava it turns back the sight in matters of other arts. That is, once Kavyeshu Nimagnasya Anyasu Kalasu Ruchihi eva na jayate. Yatha Ruchir na jayate tatha Kanta Vakshu. That is just as how, Kavyeshu, he becomes very immersed in a kavyam, and he stops having any ruchi, or he does not have as much of an attraction towards other arts, right? Maybe painting, singing, anything. I think that's why Neelakanta Dikshita didn't have much of an attraction towards singing, and he had to say something about it, right? So once a poet gets immersed, or once a reader gets immersed in that poetry, Anya Kalasu, in the matters of other arts, Drishtim Vyavartayanti. This poetry turns back his sight from other poetry. So anya kalasu ityatra saptami vibhakti yadyapi asti tatra vishaya saptami, you'll have to take it as vishaya saptami. So in the matters of other arts, the poetry turns the sight away. Okay, turns back the sight. So vyavartayanti. Next one, kalam mahantam kalam kshanavad nayanti. Atra utpreksha. It's a great period of time is quickly spent as if it were just a moment. The poetry makes a person spend a great time with just 1 minute. You'll keep on, you're so immersed in that poetry that you don't understand the passage of time. So it's very similar to when you spend your time with your beloved, then you don't know, you don't understand how that passage of time went on or how much of time went by. You're unable to understand, and even a great period of time, kshanavad nayanti, it would just go past in a minute, like a minute. So tatha kanta, daksha kanta iva, like an expert beloved, kavita, poetry, dhinoti, prinayati, santoshayati, it makes a person happy. Okay. Poetry, kavita, pleases a person who, by confusing the mind. So what are all the adjectives you have? Vividaihi vachobihi vyamohayanti. It confuses the mind with different kinds of speech. Yatha kanya api evameva kanta api vividaihi bahuprakaraihi vagvilasaihi vyamohayanti. She makes the mind confused. Tadanantaram yada when we get when a person gets attracted towards the speech of a beloved, then anya kalasu drishtim anya kalasu drishtim vyavartayanti. Right? So sevikkunavillada poldu. Correct. So Shevi here would mean just I think Thiruvalluvar used that in the form of singing, but not poetry, but I would just take it as literature also. So Anya Kalasu Drishtim Vyavartayanti, there are 64 different kalas. Even gambling is one of the kala. Thieving, that is Chaurya Kala api asti. Tatra drishtihi athava ruchihi na jayate. Evam, you will start liking only poetry or studying or singing and other things. So anya kalasu drishtim vyavartayanti. You will only want to keep talking to the woman of your dreams or your whom you love. So in the same way, the poetry also attracts you in such a manner that you will want to only continue being in that poetry world. Tatha mahantam kalam kshanavad nayanti kavita kanta iva dhinoti. Okay. Move on to the next one. Now, mahantam kalam, if you can, what are the different types of ways in which you can derive pleasure from this poetry? This is vividaihi vagvilasaihi vyamohayanti anya kalasu drishtihi na jayate mahantam kalam api kshanavad nayanti esha kavita iti uktam. But what are the stages that are involved in this? It is understandable that a long time can pass within like a minute. But what are the stages involved in reading this poetry? Chintasu samsarga vishesha labhe sandarbhane cha atha padaihi padanam punar vimarshe cha bhavan kavinam ananda bhuma vachasam asima daksha kanya iva dhinoti. Kavita makes it, poetry pleases a person. Now, how is that pleasure? What sort of a pleasure is that? Is it something that we can describe? No. Ananda bhuma, the ananda bhuma here means bahoho bhavaha bahutvam is bhuma. The great joy. So ananda bhuma sukhasya bahutvam bahulyam atra vachasam asima. It is not, it is beyond words. Sima is a border. Vak sima would mean that it can be described by vak. Vachasam, vacham, asima. There is no limit in the sense it cannot be described by words. The joy that a poet experiences, or even kavinam ananda bhuma, I would put it as even a reader also. Atra kevalam kavinam itina. So when we give the kavya prayojanam in Kavya Prakasha, he would say that it is for both the kavi and the reader. Anybody who comes within the range of that poetry itself experiences joy. It is not only the poet who experiences joy, it is also the reader who experiences a happiness by analyzing about a poetry that somebody else has written also. That's what we keep doing here. We are not creating poetry here, and because the creation of poetry is a very individual process and it is a lonely process. It is not something that you do with another person. It involves only your own prajna and yourself. Whereas reading and teaching, and that can involve 2-3 people also. You can sit in a study group, you can analyze different types of words and meanings and everything, and derive great pleasure from analyzing poetry. So what are all the places where a poet can attain happiness? Chintasu, samsarga vishesha labhe, sandarbhane, atha tadanantaram padaihi padanam punaha vimarshe bhavan ananda bhuma. So bhavan again here is Shatrapratyam. So the great joy that is brought about, or that is being present in the following actions, is beyond words. So what are all the actions here? Chintasu. Prathamam kavya vastu vishaye punah punaha mananam kartavyam. Chinta. Chinta is just not worrying here. Thinking. You'll have to, a poet first thinks about what is the subject matter of the poetry that he has to describe now. Right? A poet cannot just randomly start off on something. He has to have a plan on hand, right? So that is kavya vastu. Vastu is the plot of a poetry. So he keeps thinking again and again about the plot of the poetry. First he has to get the subject matter. So chintasu bhavan ananda bhuma. Anvayaha tu tatra tatha vartate. The happiness bhavan that is present in thinking about poetry. Okay. So sarvatra evameva saptami vibhakti anvayaha bhavati. Chintasu, in the process of thinking about the subject matter of a poetry, the next step is samsarga vishesha labhe. Now he has to get the connection. Samsargaha is sambandhaha. So samsarga visheshaha would be a sambandha prakaraha, the process of any connection between the vastu. So you can have a small plot. Okay, what I'm going to think about is, let's say Kumara Sambhavaha. Guha has to be born. So that is the whole thing. Now he has to start looking at the sambandham to arrive at the process of the birth of Guha or Kartikeya. Right? So that sambandha visheshaha yatra vartate, tadrisha sambandha vishesasya labhe praptau, when getting the process of connection. So he has to get the process of connection between words. Or from the vastu part, he has to move to how to express it into words, and that connection between the artha and the words. That connection, he has to get the right connection. Okay, so it can be a connection in the form of poetry or gadyam or champu. He can think of how to express it, maybe write a novel. No, there can be different ways of expression. Even within poetry, you have different types of meters with which you can express the poetry. Even in English, you have different meters, but Sanskritam has much more permutations and combinations for you to play with. And then you have the Gadya type of literature, you have a Stotra type of literature. The types of literature that is present in Sanskritam gives you that samsarga for the plot and how to express it. So samsarga vishesha labhe tatrapi kavinam bhavan ananda bhuma vachasam asima. So that is the second process. The third process is deciding the context. Sandarbhane bhavan ananda bhuma. He then has to decide what sort of a context he has to put these characters in. You have the plot, you have the storyline, and then now you'll have to bring in the context. I think a person can easily write a poetry by just analyzing this shloka, right? Now you'll have to bring in the context, decide the context, sandarbhane, bhavan, and the beauty, the joy that he derives from creating the context for each thing. Otherwise, we would not have so many Ramayana-based dramas. And Ramayanam was written once, but then you have Tulsi Das's Ramayana, you have Kamba Ramayanam, you have Mahavira Charitam, Uttar Rama Charitam, you have dramas, you have poetries, Raghuvamsha. There are so many different things that have come out of it. Even Mahabharatam, if you take Mahabharatam, the influence of Mahabharata over the literature has been extensive. The difference is these things. Because the poet adopts certain types of connections, the process with which he expresses, and then sandarbha, the context matters. The context in Mahabharata might be completely different. He might introduce his own creativity to create a context here to give life to that character. The character might be just a one-line character in the epic, but the poet would give it an entire drama, give that character an entire drama. Right? So sandarbhane is in deciding the context. Bhavanna ananda bhuma. The final process here is, now he has decided the vastu, he has decided the storyline, and he has also decided the context. Now he has to actually put in the words. Padaihi padanam na kevalam tatra sthapanam na punah punaha vimarshe. He has to analyze it again and again to decide which word will go with which word. See, once you start writing poetry, you will understand this process. You know, when you start writing poetry, you will find that, no, this word is better than this word. Meter, there are many words that will fit the meter. You know, in that is where the dosha prakaranam comes into play. In Kumara Sambhava, there is a shloka where he says, Dvayam gatam samprati shochaniyam. So, Parvati is doing tapas here, and Shiva comes to see her, and he says, you know, you are not supposed to, why are you undergoing such a, you know, tough process of doing this tapas and everything? And who are you trying to attain? So she says, my goal here is Shiva. But Shiva has come here as a, you know, a brahmachari, and he is talking to her. So he says, Dvayam gatam samprati shochaniyatam samagama prarthanaya kapalinaha samagama prarthanaya pinakinaha. Ityapi vaktum shakyate. You know, the kapalinaha pinakinaha va tatra vrittam yadi pashyamaha tatra ubhayorapi sadhu eva. Because kapalinaha pinakinaha, the word has the same amount of letters, the same hrasva dirgha there. So in that meter vrittam, it will perfectly fit. But you will have to look at the context here. Etat padam atra asmin sandarbhe sadhuva nava iti drashtavyam tatra tattu punar vimarshe eva drishyate. What is the context there? Two things have been reduced to a very pitiable state because they have asked to be with Shiva. So Shiva himself tells this to Parvati. He says, Dvayam gatam samprati shochaniyatam. I really pity two things in the world. Why? Samagama prarthanaya. Because both of those things wanted to go to this Shiva. But the word he uses there is actually kapalinaha. Why the difference is, I'll tell you. Kalachasa chandramasi kalavati. So one is you The other is, one is Parvati, the other is this Chandrakala, which also wanted to go and stay on top of Shiva's head. So these two are really to be pitied very much. But then the word, if you use Pinaki, the problem there is, Yadi Saha Pinaki Asti, then he can rule the entire world with his bow. Pinakaha tu Shivasya Dhanuhu. So that Pinakam, with his Pinaka, he can rule the entire world. Then what is pitiable about the state of Parvati and Chandrakala wanting to go and be with Shiva? They can rule the entire world. There is nothing of that sort. But when you put it as Kapali, Yaha Swayam Bhiksham Karoti, Saha Anyam Katham Palayati. Right? So he himself is taking a Kapalam and he is roaming around in this entire world, and you want to go and be with him. How can that fit? So tatra shabdanam punah punaha vimarshe eva, then there is a force there. You decide whether it is Kapali or Pinaki. Both readings are there, but you will have to take the reading of Kapali only to stress the fact that, you know, Parvati will be laughed upon by everybody if she wants to go and be with a person who is taking a Kapalam and doing Bhiksha. It's a begging bowl, right? So Padaihi Padanam Punarvimarshe, analyzing it again and again, examining the words with words frequently, again and again, you have to explain those two, analyze those two, and try to see how they fit well. You have the context, you have the vastu, you have everything in hand, but then if the padam is not fitting properly, you can use bhujagaha, bhujagadipaha, but that kundali has a different meaning there. Now, that context you will understand this pada vimarsham only when you read more and more poetry there. Right? So, Bhavan Ananda Bhuma, the great joy that is present in Chintasu, in thinking, Samsarga Vishesha Labhe, in getting the process of connection, Sandarbhane, in deciding the context, Atha Padaihi Padanam Vimarshe, Punarvimarshe, and examining words frequently with the other words. So one set of words, Padanam Vimarshaha, Katham Padaihi Vimarshaha, Ekasya Padasya Anya Padena Saha, Katham Tatra Yojaniyam iti Vimarshaha Kartavyaha Punah Punaha. Tatra Kavinam Bhavan Ananda Bhuma, the joy that he gets, the happiness that a poet gets, Vachasam Asima. It's a personal experiences. It is definitely, you know, when you start analyzing which word would be better, it gives a great joy to do that for poets. And of course, for readers also, when you analyze a shloka that is written by Kalidasa in this manner, then you understand how beautiful it is. You know, it is happiness, that something you have to experience. Right? How much ever I explain it, it's not going to be understood. Chintasu samsarga vishesha labhe sandarbhane chatha padaif padanam punar vimarshe cha bhavan kavinam ananda bhuma vachasam asima. Now, Ananda, once he said Ananda anubhutyaitu yogaha avashyakaha. Right? In Darshana literature, if you take it in Darshana literature, where, you know, Vedante, Raso Vaisaha iti yuktam, Brahmanandaha is the ultimate form of happiness in the world. Everybody, every Darshana, every scientific literature has come to talk about what is the ultimate happiness that a person can achieve. Everybody is looking to be happy in this world. Right? So, when you say Ananda Bhuma, Vachasam Asima, the Anandam that you experience from poetry is beyond words. But then what is the difference between the Anandam that you experience in philosophical? In the philosophical literature, they talk about an Ananda Anubhuti, and for that you need yoga. Right? And yoga is, there are 8 parts to yoga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, etc., etc. Kavita is also one type of yoga. Nilakanta Dikshita compares these two, but he says this is a better yogam to give you happiness, because the tough part of yoga is all this pranayamam and asanas and controlling of sense organs. Nothing of that sort is needed in Kavita. Right? Anayata pranam asamyataksham abrahmacharya anashanadi khedam chittam maheshe nibhritam nidhatum siddhaha kavinam kavitaiva yoga. Kavinam kavita eva, the poetry of poets, eva yoga. It is a yoga, it is a type of yoga which is siddhaha. Siddhaha here means sreshtatvena nischitaha. Siddhaha also means nischitaha. And so I would take it as sreshtaha yoga. When you say siddhanta, siddhanta is something, it is a final conclusion. Nothing else is, you have Purva Pakshi, there can be many different arguments, but then once you come to Siddhanta, Ayameva Siddhanta, Atava Iti Siddhantat, Iti Radhantaha, these are the type of words that they use in Shastra, literature. And when you say Siddhantaha, it means Antaha Siddhaha, Nischitaha, which means this is the final conclusion and this is the greatest argument beyond which another argument cannot be presented. Tari atra kavita eva siddhaha yogaha iti chet, atra poetry is the final or it is the greatest form of yoga. For what? Why do we need this yoga? Yoga Shastra also wants you to concentrate your mind on the God. Maheshe chittam nidhatum. Swamanaha maheshe ishware nidhatum sthapayitum. In order to place your mind in that form of God, you need yoga. Right? So maheshe nibhritam chittam nidhatum. Nibhritam atra you can take it as nischalam. Without unwavering mind, the mind does not move anywhere else. Nibhritam iti padasya tu rahasyam ityapi arthaha vartate, but here we take it as nischalam. Nischalam yatha syat tatha manaha nidhatum. It is a kriya visheshana here. So in order to place the mind in the Lord, in the contemplation of the Lord, in a manner in which it does not waver. Okay, nibhritam. So nischalam chittam nischalam nidhatum maheshe kavita eva yoga. Now what are the adjectives for this yoga? Yoga is again a type of, you can take it as a kriya here, and all three adjectives, anayata pranam, asamyata aksham, abrahmacharya anashanadi khedam, all these three can be taken as an adjective to the karma or yoga karma. So yasmin karmani pranam anayata. So pranaha anayataha. These words are a little tough. I'll just give you the simple meaning of this and go into the technical details of each word. Anayata pranam here would mean na ayataha pranaha yasmin karmani ityukte yatra karmani yasmin karmani shvasaha na niyataha. Ayata means controlled. Anayata would mean without controlling your breath. In yoga, you do pranayama, prana ayama, correct? So ayata prana, he has just used the kta pratyaya and put it in front. Okay, so anayata pranam, without having controlled your breath. In Kavita, you don't need to control your breath and all and perform this. You can be normal and read Kavita, but then you will be completely immersed. Once you start reading Stotra Granthas, you'll understand how your mind is completely absorbed in that Supreme, right? Without even having to do the process of pranayama, etc. The next one is asamyata aksham. Aksham is indriyam. Akshani, indriyani, na samyatani, asamyata aksham. The sense organs are also not controlled here. You don't need to control your sense organs. You can feel the rasam, Shringara. You can read Shringara Rasa You can read that love sentiment, and yet, you can easily put your mind into Maheshwara. When you read Saundarya Lahari, you will understand, right? So, asamyata aksham. All the sense organs can function in their normal capacity, but at the same time, you can easily place your mind in the God. You can easily concentrate and think about the God because of the kavita, because of the poetry, because you're reading different kinds of poetry which lead your mind towards understanding and relishing that beauty there. Okay. The next one is Abrahmacharya Anashanadi Khedam. Brahmacharyam, Anashanam. So Brahmacharyam is celibacy. So without undergoing troubles, kheda, without undergoing troubles of brahmacharya and anashana or fasting. Ashanam is eating, anashanam is without eating. So not eating, abrahmacharya is not having a union with other women, other people. So which is brahmacharyam and anashanadi Khedaha yasmin karmani yogena vidyante tadrisha yogaha eva kavita. So the process where you don't have to go through the troubles of celibacy and fasting and other things also. You can take asanam, etc. Now all these three point out to the 5 different steps involved in yoga. Now yoga has its Ashtanga Yoga. There are 8 different parts there. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhayaha. Iti Yogasya Ashtavangani. This is a sutram in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. One of the sutras there in Sadhanapada. Now, if you look at the words that are there, you have Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. These 5 are one part, and then Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. These 3 are another part. So these are Bahiranga, these are Antaranga. So what is Bahiranga and Antaranga? Bahiranga is something that is outward. So Yama, Niyama, Asana, these are all actions that have to be performed in the physical realm. Whereas Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi is in the mental realm. So Dharana is concentrating the mind on Ishvara. Then Dhyana is where you are so involved that the other outer sense organs do not function and everything has completely become centered within the mind and on Ishvara. Samadhi is a state where you are you're not aware of the world at all outside you. So all these 3 are mental activities, but the Bahiranga activities are Yama, Niyama, Asana, and Pranayama and Pratyahara. Okay, these are the 5 things that are necessary. Yama is each one has different things there. You have Satyam, Asteyam, Brahmacharyam, and all these are yamas. Yama is a control of the outer functions, and Brahmacharyam there is where which is mentioned in the shloka here. You have Abrahmacharya Anashanadi Khedam. Brahmacharyam is Gupta Indriyasya Upasthasya cha Samyamaha. So Gupta Indriyam is private part, Upastha is the female part, so it is a Samyama or a control of stopping yourself from having sex. So that is Brahmacharyam. Next is Niyama. So Niyama, the word that he has given here is for Niyama is Anashana. Anashanam here is part of Niyama. And niyamas are rules that we need to follow, like vratam, etc. You have tapaha, which is one of those niyamas. I have not explained everything, otherwise it would become a yoga class. So I've just taken those words which is necessary to explain the technical term that is present in the shloka. So tapaha, there is dvandva sahanam, and the meaning that Vyasa gives in the Bhashyam for the sutram is dvandvascha jighatsa pipase Shitoshne, Sthanasane, Kashtamona Akara Maunecha. So Dvandva Sahanam, the tolerance of dualities in life, like Shitoshnam. in Gita, you would have read Sukha Dukke Samaya Kritva, Labha Labho Jaya Jayo, right? The Sukham and Dukkham, Labham and Alabham. These, wherever there are extremities, you try to tolerate those extremities. Here he gives examples of Jigatsa. Jigatsa is Attum Icha, the feeling to eat, which is kshut, we say hunger, right? Jigatsa is actually the icha to eat. So jigatsa, and pipasa is patum icha, pipasa. So generally we use the word kshut and pipasa, but jigatsa pipase is more right because both have that sannanta pratyaya. So the jigatsa is the feeling to eat, which you voluntarily control that feeling in order to control your outer body urges and try to place the mind in God. So this is one of the niyama that you follow. So he mentions niyamas with the word anashana, and he also mentions adipadam, so we can take asana also with that. Actually, I have not mentioned that asanam is sthira sukham asanam, right? So asanas are the bhujangasana, dhanurasana, all these type of bodily flexibilities that you do, so that you, when you sit for dhyanam, you don't think about the problems of your body. You maintain your body really well in such a manner that you can sit for hours together in dhyanam, if you are able to do it at some point. Sorry. Next is pranayamam. Pranayamam is the anayata pranam. The first word he mentions there is without having to do pranayamam. What is this pranayamam? Tasmin sati, when your asana is in control, when you have yama and niyama, this is stages. You do yama, you perform yama, and once you have it under control, then you go to niyamam, then you go to pranaya, asana, then pranayama. So tasmin sati, shwasa prashwasayoho gati vichchedah. When you are doing asana or anything in your life, you have to be aware of the exhalation and inhalation. Shwasa, prashwasa. Shwasa is inhalation, prashwasa is exhalation. Gati vichchedah is stopping it. So which is rechaka, kumbhaka, kumbhakam is holding your breath inside or holding your breath outside. Once you inhale, you hold your breath inside, or once you exhale, you hold it in such a manner that you don't inhale again. That intermediate process is called gati vichcheda, or it is also called kumbhaka. So pranayama, this is pranayama. You don't need to do all sorts of things for kavita here. Antar kumbhaka and bahya kumbhaka. Correct. The next is pratyahara. Asamyataksham. The word asamyataksha in the shloka corresponds to pratyahara. Pratyahara means, I have taken from Vishnu Purana. It is a quotation given in the Vyasa Bhashyam for Patanjali Yoga Sutra. I didn't want to take that Yoga Sutra there, just for a difference, that's all. The sutram there is Swavishaya Asamprayoge Chittaswarupa Anukara Iva Indriyanam Pratyaharaha. So Indriyanam Pratyaharaha, the control of senses is Pratyahara. In Vishnu Puranam he says Shabdadishu Anushaktani Shabda Sparsha Gandha Rasa Twak. So Shabda Sparsha Rasa Gandha and Drishti, right? These are the 5 objects that you receive with your indriyas. So indriyanam shabdadishu anushaktani, the indriyas, the sense organs that are completely attached, anushakta, anuraktaha, anuraktani indriyani, nigrihya, akshani, you control those indriyas. And kuryat chittanukarini pratyahara parayanaha yogavit. A yogavit, a person who understands yoga, he controls his indriyas and does not allow those indriyas to go and receive those objects in the world. Okay, there are different types of objects in the world, and we react with the objects of the world because the indriyas are attached to those objects. A yogavit, a person who is pratyahara parayana, who is involved in pratyahara, must try to control those sense organs from understanding those objects in the world. So this is pratyaharam. Once these 5 are done, then you can go to dharana, dhyana, samadhi. That is when your mind can be fixed on the God. Right? Sorry. So, anayata pranam, asamyata aksham, abrahmacharya anashanadi khedam, yatha syat tatha kritva eva, maheshe chittam nibhritam nidhatum, nischala rupena chittam manaha maheshe nidhatum shakyate. This is for normal people who want to follow the process of yoga. But we have a different yoga here, which is much better. You don't need to do all of these things. Automatically, once you start understanding, then it will automatically, once you start understanding the poetry and once you start getting involved in that poetry, you will automatically find yourself being attracted towards that God, and you don't need to do all of these. Kheda is dukkha. These are all just troubling your body too much. Okay. Anayata pranam asamyataksham abrahmacharya anashanadi khedam chittam maheshe nibhritam nidhatum siddhaha kavinam kavitaiva yogaha. I'm going to stop early today. So any questions, please, you can ask. Yeah, 1 minute. Yes, Nandini Mahodaya.
Namaste, ma'am. In that vyomasanskrit vividhai vajobhi, that 24, I think. Okay. In that, is it utpreksha there?
Yes. So, kalam mahantam kshanavatu nayanti is an utpreksha there. And then kanta iva daksha kanya is a upama there. So, kavita daksha kanta iva ityatra upama vartate.
Iva so, dhinoti. So it may be kriya utpreksha, then kanta iva kavita dhinoti.
No. Tatra upama eva. Okay. Pleasing is, so dhinoti is your samanya dharmam there. So the samanya dharmas are actually 4 there. So one is vyamohayanti, anantaram vyavartayanti, kshanavatu nayanti, tadanantaram dhinoti, prinanam.
Okay.
4 sadharana dharmas are there. This utpreksha is present only in this kshanavatu nayanti, and this becomes an anga for this upama angi.
Okay. Now, if the kanta iva is not there, then will it be samasokti? Can we say?
Kanta. If kanta itself is not there. Yes.
Then that's why the vyangya is actually lost because of the mention of kanta. I feel like that the vyangya.
Yes, definitely. Wherever upama is present, if samasokti cannot come, and if samasokti is there, definitely samasokti type of alankara is a step better than upama.
Yes. So that is lost here. That Vengyatam is lost here. And another thing about the Kavita, the Moksha, Yoga, etc. In the Sahitya Darpanam, I am remembering that the Chadur Varga Bhala Prapti Sukhad Alpadhiyamavi. Kavya Deva Yatastena. Like that he is saying.
Correct.
It's the same thing here also. He is saying.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank
See,
you.
This is like one Kavya Alankara Shastra text also. The first Sarga is more like that.
Thank you.
No problem. Arun Kumar Mahodaya.
Namam Singh Mahodaya. Understanding Kavya அஷ்டாங்க யோகாவோட கம்பேர் பண்றது கொஞ்சம் சம்பந்தம் இல்லாத விஷயமா தெரியல.
சம்பந்தம் இல்லங்கறடா.
ஆமா. அந்த அஷ்டாங்க யோகா ஏன் உள்ள கொண்டு வரணும் காவிய அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் பண்ண?
No, it is just a comparison here. That's all. It is a better yoga.
கொஞ்சம் ஜாஸ்தியா தெரியலையா?
நீங்க அப்படி புரிஞ்சுக்கணும். இல்ல see the thing is when you what is the purpose of yoga? To attain happiness, adane.
No, to attain union with God.
Union with God.
Understanding happiness or getting happiness.
No, getting happiness. So union with God engaradu No, union with God is Saha Brahma Swarupaha, adu Ananda Swarupa. Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma thane. Anantam Brahma, Anandancha. So you can go until that thing. அதுக்காக சொல்றோம். It's bliss.
Okay. இப்ப கபாலினக பினாக்கினக ரெண்டு வேர்ட் செலக்ஷன் ஆத்தரே எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணிருக்காரா இல்ல அவர் காவியத்தை படிச்சு வேற யாராவது இதுக்கு விளக்கம் கொடுத்திருக்காங்களா?
வேற யாராவது தான். Other people have given an explanation to that because the Kalidasa's original writing is not present today. So we rely on
என்ன திங்க் பண்ணி எழுதி இருக்காருங்கிறது யாரால சரியா புரிஞ்சுக்க முடியும்? ஒண்ணு அவரோட டிஸ்கிரிபாஸால புரிஞ்சுக்க முடியும், இல்ல அவரை நல்லா தெரிஞ்சவங்களால புரிஞ்சுக்க முடியும். தேர்ட் பர்சன் யாராவது அவர் காவியத்தை படிச்சுட்டு அவங்களுடைய அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்டிங் என்னவா இருக்குமோ அதை வச்சுதான் அவங்களுக்கு ஒரு டீக்கா எழுத முடியும். அவருடைய ஒரிஜினல் திங்கிங்க வெளிக்கொண்டு வர முடியுமா?
So original, you try as much as possible to try to bring the original thinking. You try that. Avladhan. There are different manuscripts available with maybe 9 of it will have one reading, one will have another reading. You try to fix what is the reading. You'll analyze his poetry and try to find out which is the best reading. Adana. You try as much as possible.
போயிட்டு ஒரு ப்ராப்ளம் இருக்கு இல்லையா? வேற யாரோ எழுதின டீக்காவை தான் நாம படிச்சு இந்த ஆத்தர் இதுதான் சொல்லியிருக்கணுமோ இவர் சொல்லியிருக்காங்க நாம புரிஞ்சுக்க முடியும் இல்லையா?
எஸ், அப்படி மட்டும் அவசியம் இல்லை. இப்ப இதுக்கு டீக்காவே கிடையாது சார், நான் சொல்றதுதான். நீலகண்ட தீட்சிதா சிவாலீலார்ணவம் does not have any டீக்கா.
அவர் எழுதவே இல்லையா?
ஒருத்தருமே ஒண்ணுமே எழுதல. There is no டீக்கா for this. There is no English translation for this. There is one Tamil translation available. That's all. There is no Mallinatha for this. But for Kumara Sambhava, for every other poetry, you will find some Vyakyanam or the other.
இதெல்லாம் அவங்க எங்கேயும் போய் பிரசன்ட் பண்ண மாட்டாங்களா? அவங்க எழுதி அப்படியே வச்சிருவாங்களா? அவ்வளவுதான்.
They might have presented in some court. But where would the records எல்லாம் தேடிட்டு இருக்க முடியாது சார்? அது ஹிஸ்டரி கிளாஸ்.
இல்ல ஹிஸ்டரி கிளாஸ் யாருமே இதெல்லாம் எழுதி வைக்கலையா? ஏன்னா பிரசன்ட் பண்ணியிருந்தாங்கன்னா கண்டிப்பா அங்க சர்ச்சா இருந்திருக்கும். சர்ச்சா இருந்தா அவருக்கு அந்த எக்ஸ்பிளனேஷன் கொடுத்துருது பாரு.
Maybe they understood it. Maybe they understood it at that point of time. தெரியல சார். It's I don't think he might have presented it like that in a court. அது பிரசன்ட் பண்ணியிருந்தா சரி, இல்லைன்னா என்ன பண்ணலாம்? நம்ம தானே எழுதணும். We have to look at it and we have to find explanations for it and try to translate it. நம்ம தானே டீக்கா எழுதணும்.
இப்போ மெட்டா காக்னிஷன் போயிட்டா அவங்களுடைய திங்கிங்கே வேற மாதிரி இருக்கும், நம்மளுடைய திங்கிங்கே வேற மாதிரி இருக்கும். அவங்க திருஷ்டியே வேறையா இருந்திருக்கும், நம்ம திருஷ்டியே வேறையா இருந்திருக்கும். சொல்ல முடியாது சார். You can't. That is why you still have Vyakyanas for Kalidasas. Newer Vyakyanams are coming up even now. That's why you can't decide. Okay. Thank you, sir. Can we say Nilakanta Dikshita is more of a Shastra Kavi then? Definitely, yes. I would think that Nilakanta Dikshita is a Shastra Kavi because he connects Shastram with Kavita and tries to explain it. So without an understanding of Shastram, you cannot explain this. So there are different types of Kavis. Poets who just enjoy giving you beautiful things, yes. Like Kalidasa, Nilakanta Dikshita is also a Shastra Kavi where you find nuggets of Shastram and technical details in his poetry. Definitely. Any other questions? Sure, I think I'll stop with this.